Peace and love, brothers and sisters, on this beautiful July 3rd, 2976, which is equivalent to your 2026 Gregorian calendar. Today, I'm going to go ahead and be doing this quick commentary, following up what we've been speaking in regards to, the descendants from the territory we call the British Isles, who are known either as Celts, historically from the original stock, but they're known as English, Irish, Scottish, Welsh people from the territory that we call the British Isles. And the goal is to be able to bring clarity into that time frame that a lot of folks have no idea about because of the secrecy, or the information has been shrouded and in mystery. So the goal now is to bring clarity to that time frame, which is about 400 years almost, if I'm not mistaken. But for those of you who have been following along, hopefully you have come to a understanding regarding who you are based off of your genealogy, which cooperate with the information we're going to be sharing. So I don't want to be too long-winded with the introduction. Without further ado, once again, this is the brother Yada is Keith. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the notification bell, so therefore you'll be notified when I go live. And also too, don't forget to follow the brother Yada is Keith on his YouTube page, and I will go ahead and put the link of his page right there down at the bottom. All right, let's go ahead and get started.
About who was on those plantations in America and the Caribbean? I'll let you answer that question. I'm about to show you official archive documents and show you exactly how nobility from Europe and their descendants got to America and the Caribbean, and the origin of a lot of your surnames. This will be part 16 of the Black Nobility of Europe series. So let's get into it. Now, you have to know who the Jacobites are to put these pieces together. I'm going to go through this real quickly. The Jacobites are basically a political party of supporters for the Stuart dynasty, or House of Stuart.
And that's very important moving forward, brothers and sisters. Those who are known as Jacobites, this is a political party. So this was a political movement, and these what they would call political activists in regards to what they are doing. So that you need to go ahead and pay attention to and remind yourself on what's going on, is what's taking place during this time frame, because the monarchy who was running the joint at this time, I would say, after King James popped into, you had the Charles I and Charles II. And so part of the Jacobitism, or the Jacobite rising, was to once again get the Stuarts back on the throne, even though they didn't truly have the right credentials to be on the English throne. All right, let's go ahead and continue.
The person you're looking at on the screen is James Charles Stuart. Okay, he's a famous Stuart king, better known as King James I of England and the VI of Scotland. Now, this is the king who authorized the KJV Bible. Notice how he looks. Very interesting. Now, notice in the upper right corner of this oval emblem, it says Jacobus. That is Latin for James. That's where you get Jacobite from. Okay. Now, King James I, he had a grandson, James II. Now, when his grandson lost.
So like he said, for those of you who, especially who read the King James Version Bible, this is King James. And yes, he does have a swarthy complexion. Also, too, you should know this history, especially if you're going to be utilizing that Bible, because the Bible itself, the English version, didn't come into colonies until King James came into existence in 1601. So he had what we call the Shakespearean company via Francis Bacon help create or help re-edit the Bible for those of you within the British American colonies to be able to receive it in English. All right, so that's something you need to remember. You need to know this history, especially if this is who you are.
Lost the throne, that is when the Jacobite movement kicked in full force, okay? Now, to make a long story short, the Jacobites, they fought several times to get the throne back, but they failed. They lost, okay? And at that point, they became prisoners of war. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the official archive manuscripts. Notice what it's called: prisoners for transportation. These are indigenous Europeans, and we're about to take a look at these people. And this is in the 1700s, okay? Now, I'll be coming from this book. This book is based on the manuscripts I just showed you. It's titled Jacobite Gleanings from State Manuscripts, published in 1903 by Forbes, okay? So let's take a look at these indigenous Europeans. Now, they claim people who look like us were not Jacobites, so we should not be on this list, okay? Let's take a look.
Exactly. So for the future references, brothers and sisters, your surnames that you think were given to you by slave owners are not slave owner names. They're your ancestors' free names, aka their inheritance. They come from what we call a letters patent that was granted to them by the king, and you received it as an inheritance. And if you throw that away, or you don't honor and respect it and understand the importance of it, then you lose those rights that come with it. And unfortunately, a lot of you have forgot who you are, and you don't think this is you. So therefore, you have strayed away from the foundation. You have strayed away from the value system. You have strayed away from everything that actually makes you have that nationality, that identity, in regards to being able to, stand onto something and have a voice today to be able to speak up and, share that amongst the world. So you no longer are seen as an undesirable entity or an undesirable human.
Now, I only highlighted a few. There are plenty more. I'm not going to go over everybody on this list. I just want you to notice the two I have underlined. You can clearly see their complexion, okay? And let's take a look and see who they were, get a couple of details, okay? You have James Dunbar. He was 17 years old, a laborer. You have Joseph Brown. He was 16 years old, a tailor. Okay, these are indigenous Europeans who already have their surname, okay, and they had families. Now, am I saying everybody on this list look like us? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying
Exactly. We're not saying that everyone on that list look like us, aka brown complexion, dark complexion, the misnomer term black, swarthy, all of these words. They're just description, identifiers in regards to give you a better idea in regards to who it is that they're talking about. And like he said, these are your family's last names. That's their inheritance. You didn't receive those names from a slave owner. Once again, and during before so-called indentured servitude time, the British Isles were not practicing so-called slavery, and slavery was not even permitted on English soil. So that you have to understand and remember.
and a lot of them did, a whole lot. And you can go through this list yourself. I'm about to post the rest of them right now. Now, notice what I have highlighted in yellow above the list. It says DO on the list equals ditto, same as above. So when you go through this list and you see DO, that means same description or characteristics as above, okay? Now, we're looking at page 49 if you want to screenshot this. This is page 48 if you want to screenshot it. This is page 50 if you want to screenshot it. Okay? Now, one quick note. The list I just showed you, the French captured that ship and those people and took them to Martinique, which is in the Caribbean. Okay? Now, this is a very important part. We're about to look at some more deportations of indigenous Europeans and Jacobites. Okay? Now, we're coming from the same book. Okay? Now, notice the first thing I have underlined, okay? We're just going to read that line. It says, all the rest are safe arrived at Barbados, Jamaica, and Virginia. These are more deportations to America and the Caribbean, okay? Now, notice what I have underlined in the last snippet, plantations, okay? These indigenous Europeans, these Jacobites, are being sent to plantations. That's important. Now, notice it said Jamaica. Let's see what happened in Jamaica. Okay, I'll be coming from this book if you want a screenshot. Okay, I'm going to summarize this real quick. They noticed that the Jamaicans who look like us had a lot of Irish surnames, but when they searched the records, they could not find plantation owners with the same name.
Exactly. Like I was telling you before, I read the same book, Whence the Black Irish of Jamaica. I had a video, or still have the video up online. You need to definitely take a look went in depth in that book. But like he said, they didn't find any so-called slave owners in that territory with Irish surnames, which meant that they were the originators of those surnames, aka those Gaelic surnames. So it's very important to know what happened in that time in history, especially during the time from the fall of the Plantagenet dynasty, which brought in the Tudors, and then the Tudors transitioning to the House of Stuart, and knowing that how the Tudors and the Stuarts were the ones that dealt with the conquest of Ireland. All right, and the conquest of Ireland is what brought about the plantations of Ulster as well as the plantation of Munster. And then during that same time, that's when they start sending what? They start sending them over here to the territory we call the West Indies, as well as the Americas, ranging from Virginia, Barbados, Jamaica, of course, I would say the Carolinas, Alabama, all of these territories. You will see even before the so-called time when they say the immigration happened, that they were already sending people over.
Now you should see why. Because they had their surname before they were deported. They were indigenous Europeans, okay? Very important. Now, this is what was happening in America. When these indigenous Europeans who look like us, when they were being deported to these plantations, they were being classified as Africans, but they were still speaking the Gaelic, which is the Scottish and Irish language. I hope you understand that point. These indigenous Europeans who look like us were on these plantations still speaking Gaelic, okay? And notice these are three different articles. Notice the title of the article at the top. It says, The Gaelic-Speaking S's of 18th Century America. I just showed you a list from the 18th century, and I'm going to show you another list with 10 more ships in a moment from the 18th century with Jacobites, okay? And this was not isolated. The article in the middle of the screen, people who look like us were on the plantations in North Carolina speaking Gaelic. The article at the bottom, people who look like us were on plantations in Alabama speaking Gaelic, okay? And again, one more quick thing, because they try to tell you, they'll say, oh, well, they learned Gaelic from their masters. They did not learn Gaelic. They did not learn that language. They were speaking their indigenous language.
Exactly. And that's one of those things false notions we got to get out of. Stop thinking that so-called slave owners taught you the language that you know. First of all, it's not that easy to learn a new language. And then on top of, like I said, many times that you got to think of the type of stress and the other burdens that you're dealing with at those specific type of, environments at that time. So it would be very hard for you to be trying to understand a whole new language. And then if you're coming to trying to invade and, force folks to do something you want, 9 times out of 10, you need to know the language that they know. So therefore you can give the commands accordingly. And that's what always the invaders do first. The invaders don't come and just force their will and everything about them onto you, because first of all, how are you going to learn it? How are you going to understand it in such a quick time? That's not how it goes. They come in, what they do, they infiltrate first. They learn everything about you, learn the language. And then after they learn your language, then they do what they were doing according to their original agenda. So like he's saying that the folks who was in the South, the melanated people who were speaking Gaelic, they were speaking Gaelic because it was their indigenous or original tongue. It wasn't a tongue that was given to them by a so-called slave master. All right.
I hope you get that part. Now, this is another group of Jacobites, 639 more, being sent to plantations. This is the official archive document. This is the digital version of the document. I just want you to see plantations in America. This is the origin of a lot of your surnames. These people brought their surnames with them. Okay?
Exactly.
Here are 10 ships. These are 10 ships with Jacobites, indigenous.
And pause. And but you have to remember, the plantations themselves, they're like corporations, they're businesses. So you were like, especially if you was an indentured servant, you were an employee. And indentured servants actually had rights. They had rights that, those who were underneath a different capacity that was a little less unfortunate did not have. And even record shows that those who was considered in a less unfortunate capacity were living a little bit better than those who actually had indentured servitude capacity. So it just goes to show that once you come outside, your emotional framework and actually read the records for what they are, you can kind of start seeing a pattern that was taking place after you fell. And that was mostly to kind of keep you in an emotional state. But if you actually return to your intellectual, your intellectual capacities, utilize your intelligence, your common senses, your proper ability to use discernment, then you will start seeing that a lot of what happened to us was not just done by someone who don't look like you. It was actually done by people who look just like you. And then also too, that things that were done or that you think were done to you, what this is actually erroneous assumptions, So that way you can kind of can stop joining the rebellious bandwagon and start going to the side of, trying to bring clarity and understanding. So therefore you can become more at peace with yourself.
Europeans being sent to plantations. Here is the official archive document. This is the digital version of the document. Again, 10 different ships. This wasn't isolated, and there are more than what I just showed you. Again, they're being sent to South Carolina, Jamaica, Virginia, Maryland, Barbados. Your surname is your name. There's always an exception. The exception is not the rule. For the vast majority of cases, your surname simply comes from your ancestor. Okay? All right. Y'all be blessed.
And we appreciate Brother Yada for doing a marvelous job. Okay, so I was able to pull up the book, 1745, Jacobite Rising, or the Gleaning manuscript. And right here, it says an exact list and description of the 150 rebel prisoners shipped at Liverpool on board of the veteran John Rickey, master for the Leeward Islands, which were taken near Antigua, the 28th of June last by the diamond privateer Paul Marcel, commander, carried into Martinico, the 30th of June, 1747. All right, so once again, this is way before the so-called American Revolution. Like the brother Yada said, this is their name. This is their originally inherited incorporeal property, aka their family's property, which is, like I said before, a letters patent. And we're just going to take a look at a few. See, there's quite a few Campbells on here. A lot of them, like I said, same complexion, things of that nature. But I wanted to go specifically to the one who they have on here named George Hume. Here we go. Number 132, named George Hume, age 30. He's a writer, and he's from Edinburgh, also known as Edinburgh, Scotland. And his height is 5'7", and he's known to be a black man. And let's see if they have anything to say about Mr. Hume in here. It says, there was an Edinburgh writer, George Hume, age 30, marked as a black man, whose color would no doubt suit the West Indies. All right, so they're saying that George Hume from Edinburgh, Scotland, who had the perfect complexion, aka a black complexion that was good enough to suit the West Indies. All right, and so now let's go ahead and take a look and see, because now we know Hume is actually his surname. That's his family given name. We know that Africa never colonized the British Isles. So it's safe to say that he had to have come from where the origin his name comes from. Here we go. The history, family crest coat of arms comes from Scotland, or in this case, the British Isles. It says the etymology of Hume. The Hume family roots are found in the Bornesian clan of ancient Scotland. They lived in Berwickshire. They held the barony of Home from the very early times and possibly predate the Norman conquest in 1066. The Home family is part of a noble lineage descending from the Earls of Dunbar and the family of the Earl of Northumberland. The great ghost Patrick, a descendant of the kings of Bernicia. They first appeared in the records in 1268 when William of Home appeared on a charter. They next appear, as so many of the prominent Scottish families do, in 1296 when Geoffrey de Home of Lanarkshire swore an oath of allegiance in a ragman rolls to King Edward I of England after that king's brief conquest of Scotland. So once again, you see that it was actually the nobility as well as, you know, the regular folks, because these are political parties that were taking place, political uprisings that was taking place because of the political parties, in this case, what they believed in. And they believed in what the Stuarts stood for, as the Stuarts were claiming the divine rights of the kings. And that, as we see, had consequences that pretty much caused a lot of them to be sent over here to the territory that we call the Americas, underneath what they call transportations. The transportation. So, and these are underneath what they call the 1717 Transportation Act, brothers and sisters. So please look that up. So therefore you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going to do another video just talking specifically about transportation and Transportation Act, so you can kind of get an idea exactly what happened and why a lot of us couldn't return home. All right. So with that being said, peace.